Thank you so much for clicking the thumbnail and being interested in my work. In this video I share with you my techniques and tips on how I draw an eye using Strathmore vellum paper. So be sure to watch it right through till the end, because here and there I'll be slowing things down in real time so you can take a closer look. So let's dive in and take a look. So the first thing I do is get a center point in the center of my paper and then do the same on my reference image. It's scaled up to 9" by 6", which is half size of a 9x12. And from that point I'll just make the size of the iris as big as I want to do, and it'll always be in that sort of centered within the paper then. But I didn't want to do the size of the eye too big because it's just an eye study. And in reality, when you're doing a portrait, you'll never do it this big anyway. But I just wanted to give you an idea of how I'm using the pencils on this rough or vellum paper from Strathmore. Just about this paper is it's got quite a tooth to it, so if I try to draw this outline with a HB, it will be too grainy. So I've had to reduce the actual pencil to a 2H. Best to do the outline very lightly so it's easily erased then if you need to move it around a bit. So I'm just checking the alignment, horizontal and vertical, just to see if everything lines up correctly. I could say these are all guidelines really for when you start putting the under sort of drawing in. So it's just basically just getting things into the correct position, just move it around till it feels right. Don't overthink it, just feel your way and just sense where these things need to go, because you can easily move them. But what I'll try and do is get as close as I can do to the reference image. Now the value system I'm using is a 9 value system, which is 4 lights, 4 darks and 1 mid-tone. I tend to put them above my drawing on my board if I can. It just gives me a good idea then of the values and the relationship. So it's a really good idea to do one of those scales if you haven't done one already. Just starting off mapping out where things need to go. Just going over with the H pencil, just finding where the shapes are. Sculpture in the areas using this Mono Zero eraser, which is an amazing tool to have. Now I use that Mono Zero just to rub out where the pupil is first, and then go over again with the actual B pencil, because I want to build it up with B pencils because it's the darkest area really on that. They don't sit well when you actually put H pencils underneath, seems to anyway, so I tend to use the B straight onto that, then build it up. So that's an 8B now going in there. Then I'm using the 4B around the edge. Just trying to get rid of that white paper a little bit, because it's very sort of distracting when you're first starting. So just using the pencils and the Mono Zero eraser in conjunction to sort of sculpture the shapes. Great to get one of these in your kit if you can. A Lara pencil 9B, quite soft, so it makes it really dense in that black area. So the darkest point is the pupil. So what I'm trying to establish here is the darkest dark and the lightest light, and then the mid-tone. So the mid-tone is just at the side of that corner of the eye there. That's the mid-tone I'm putting in now with HB. And then I've got the darkest dark, which is the pupil, and then the highlight, which is the lightest light. As to smooth some of that grain so it makes it easier for me to actually put the details in the iris, what I'm using now is a 4H just covering it over. It makes it more glassified and smoother for when you put in those details in the iris. If you didn't do that, it'd be quite grainy. Now I'm mapping it out now with the HB, so I'm just finding where the shapes are within the iris and just flowing with it. Just take your time. Best not to have a time limit on these things as well, because if you start clock watching, you'll cause stress and tension because you'll be rushing things thinking you're taking too long. It takes as long as it takes, that's my motto. So just forget about time, just enjoy being in the moment, just focus on here and now. This is just a mapping out stage. Again, it's not the detail stage, that will come later. It's just getting an idea of the values and things in the right place. Before I can start thinking about details is to make sure that the values are correct. There's no good putting loads of detail in something if it's got to be changed. So what I'm doing here is trying to work out other areas so that I can go back to the iris and put the details and try and finalize that, then move on to the other areas. But before I can do that, I need to sort of map out where these eyelashes are. If you're enjoying this video, why not subscribe? It's absolutely free, then you're sure not to miss any of my future videos. Blowing it down to real time now so you can actually see me using the pencil. A very small sort of circles, squiggles, just trying to get a sort of texture while I'm doing it as well. It's similar to pastels. I don't just draw lines, it's all feeling the texture and letting the pencil just move where it needs to move. Right, back on the iris then, so trying to put a little bit more dark in there now. It's a case of just keep working on different areas until it comes together. It's seeing the whole image as a whole, not just working on one point and then moving on. It's a case of trying to get a balance everywhere. So 1 minute I'll probably be doing the eyelashes, then next minute I might go back to the iris again, or the pupil, and then just keep going backwards and forwards until it actually becomes more of a value balance. So what I'm doing is actually comparing one and the other. Right, just blocking in these eyelashes now, then going over with a darker colour. It's a case of working on several areas at the same time just to get an idea of the balance. Putting it down to real time now so you can just see how I'm doing these eyelashes. So I'm keeping the pencil really sharp. This is a 8B pencil I'm using because it's more or less as dark as the pupil, some of this area on the eyelashes, so they need to be quite dark, but I'm building it up slowly by using HB, then B, and then now I'm going over now with the darker pencil. So I'm using small movements to start with, but then I might do an eyelash, then go on to something else. You've just got to let yourself go where you need to go. Just be spontaneous and don't be fixed about where to work on next. Just want to take this opportunity to thank my Patreons again for your generous support each month. I really appreciate it. Now this actual drawing will be on my Patreon step by step in real time, so you can actually hear me and see me as I draw it, so you can hear my decisions and why I do a certain thing at a certain time. Now, to find out more about my Patreon, please check the description below for the link, and you can find all the benefits you get by joining me on there. Now I'm using the H pencils a lot just to soften that texture or the tooth of the paper so it don't create so much grain. So I'm sort of aware of that, and how to soften that is to use these H pencils, and then you can go on darker over the top. So you sort of doing both really, and it's just trying to create textures, different textures in different places by using different grades of pencil, but also being aware of what values are needed. A bit of real time here, just showing you how I'm using this Mono Zero eraser, just very finely just lifting off that graphite. And then what I'll do then is use this mechanical pencil. I'm just trying it out, not really used this much, but just giving it a go, because you can get really fine details with this. So I'm just playing with that and seeing how I like it. But the only problem I had with it is that I've only got 4B LEDs in. I needed a HB LED, so I couldn't really use it much. Because the 4B LED was too dark and it was creating too much of a grain. I'm going to invest in a few more of these mechanical pencils, different LEDs, because I think they'd be quite handy and introduce them to my graphite work. So you've got to try these things, you've got to try, you've got to keep open, try new things. So yeah, I'll be definitely ordering a few more of those. Now for the white of the eyes, I'm just using a 9H here that actually makes the grain of the paper smooth. It makes it more like the smooth paper, creates like a glassy surface on it. Then it makes it easier then to go over then with detail. So now I've used like a 2H there, just going over, just mapping out the vein in the actual white of the eyes, and using the Mono Zero as well just to reshape it if I need to. But creating that sort of smoother finish, it makes it easier to put the details on top. So it's a good tip to be aware of it when you're using this vellum paper. Now I recommend getting one of these in your kit. Now it's a kneadable eraser, and what that does is actually change value very subtly by just dabbing on it. So you can make it into a point and just dab over the area where you feel that you've gone too dark, and by dabbing it, it lifts it and changes the value into a lighter value. Really handy to have. I've left a list of all my materials in the description below, so if you want to check that out at the end. When you use a Mono Zero eraser to erase out, it leaves little bits of graphite on your drawing. Now you've got to take those off, and sometimes if you use your finger it makes a smudge. So what I tend to use is this tool. It's a rubber with a brush at the end. I find it very handy just to clean the surface off, because if you put graphite over top of these bits, it really makes a mess. It creates speckles on your drawing. Enjoying this video, why not give it a like and share it with your friends? It will mean so much to me, as this will help the channel to grow. For blending in the very subtle iris as it meets the white of the eyes, I'm using a 9H there just to sort of blend it in, and then using it on the white of the eyes as well. It's surprising when you start using this 9H how it transfers the look of the picture. Right, so it's just a case then now when you're putting these details in is just to keep aware of the values and how they compare with each other. So if you look at one shade, just see where this shade is similar on the actual reference image, and then compare and keep it the same. So it's backwards and forwards, just trying to get those values correct. It's all about values and edges to get realism. Now to create the skin texture, I've used H pencils, which creates more of a different feel to the graphite. It's almost a slightly different shade somehow, but what it does, it creates more interest, and it's easier to create the texture using the Mono Zero with the H pencils, because they easily rubbed out. and there's no texture with it, because you can have too much texture if you go in there with B pencils, and to build it up slowly with the H pencils, you know, the 4H, 2H, H and HB. Shadows, you have to be careful with shadows, because you look at it and you think it's just a dark shadow, but it's not. There's actually very subtle light changes going off in the shadows. So what I tend to do is try and subtle it up by just dabbing with the needed eraser. You can make it into a point just by pinching it, and then it creates quite subtle sort of details. I'd like to mention again that if you wanted to see this drawing, real-time video, real-time audio, as I draw it, I discuss in depth my thoughts and process. Please check out the description below for the Patreon link. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Here's the finished drawing at the correct angle. If you're interested in more of my graphite work, here's some links you might be interested in.